So until now, we have had a few classes on pain in which we have described the basic principles of pain management and management of pain with WHO analgesic ladder, including opioids, non-opioids, and adjuncts. So there are some situations in which we feel that no, this WHO ladder is not doing any good to the patient, and what can we do now? So there are some situations which we will come across, and I have faced such situations. So today we will hear from Rajagopal sir about how to manage that difficult pain. Uh, so it's over to you, sir.
So can you unmute from your end, sir?
Sorry. So thank you, Sunil, and hello, everybody. That was a good introduction, Sunil, precisely. A few months back, Sunil and his team treated a man with a scar pain following a minor thing, inguinal surgery. The pain was so severe that he attempted suicide. His son had to leave his job in another country and come back and stay here. The financial problems made sure that his daughter's education was interrupted. See, one person's pain could have a devastating effect on the whole family. Now, as Sunil said, whatever we do will work in a good number of people. What to do when it doesn't work is what we are going to talk about. Raju, I am going to share my screen with your permission.
Sure, sir.
The title was Difficult Pain. I am bringing in another word, intractable pain, which means, both means not amenable to simple, usual forms of treatment. As Sunil said, roughly 3/4 of people with cancer pain specifically and will get adequate relief with the WHO ladder. Whereas for people with non-cancer pain, the ladder as we use for cancer may not be appropriate even. We laugh away low back pain if it is somebody else's, but it can be so damaging as to destroy families. And as a first line and as a second line measure, opioids may not be advisable. They may only be a third option. So what to do? Okay, let us take the simpler thing in a way. It's much simpler to treat cancer pain than non-cancer pain. In cancer pain, what do we do for the 1/4 of patients who do not get pain relief with the simple application of the WHO ladder? That's what we talked about. This is building on whatever we talked about pain management earlier. I'll mention 3 steps in preparing ourselves, not preparing the patient. First, make sure that the patient and the family are at the center. We believe the patient. We don't start by disbelieving the patient. We don't start on, hey, this must be supracortical. He must be imagining it. That attitude we should not go with. We should start by believing the patient, and if he has pain, he has pain. The pain may have a strong emotional component, but if he has pain, he has pain. Secondly, we should stop. Okay, I have been using the ladder all through the last week. I should have thought of this earlier also. Is there anything that we can do to overcome the pathology? Say like sometimes we had to persuade people to accept chemotherapy. Say like in an ovarian malignancy with ascites. That may be the best way of getting them relief. Radiotherapy for a spine surgery, for a spine metastatic lesion. Palliative surgery for somebody with subacute obstruction. Or why? even a pleural tapping for somebody with a chest pain with malignancy. We have to correct any correctable factor, and not to underestimate it, we have to check adherence to treatment. You have given a prescription. Are they taking it? And let me now tell you, it is useless to ask, are you taking all medicines on time? They will say, Haji Saab. It doesn't mean anything. You need to get the medicines in front of you and the cheat and okay, this medicine supposed to be taken every 4 hours. So when do you take the first dose? 6 o'clock. Second? Now, very often, not infrequently, you say 4 hourly, they take it 4 times a day. We'll have to specify the time, check. And sometimes they may, if you are not aggressive, they will accept, well, actually, doctor, I'm not taking the tablet because my neighbor said this can damage the kidney. So if you say, why are you not following my instructions and be aggressive, they will not tell you the truth. They may not tell you the truth. We have to be their friends. He should feel that he is a friend. And if he is not taking the tablet properly, very important. This is more important than interventional procedures even. Sit down with them and tell them, if you are not taking the tablets as advised, there must be a good reason. Tell me, I want to understand. And then they will tell about their fears or side effects, etc., etc. And also remember, sometimes people do not take tablets because they are expensive. Your thoughtless prescription can destroy families. If you remember that in the market, those who write brand names, particularly remember, same medicine will be available at twice the cost or more. These are things to be remembered. So believe the patient about the pain, correct the correctable, check adherence to treatment. Now, if we have done this, the first 3 steps are over, preparation is over, we are now ready to move forward. Okay, anybody, any comments at this stage? Review the type of pain. Are we giving the right medicines for the right problem? Is it a nociceptive pain or is it a neuropathic pain? Not only this classification. Okay, the person with a cancer of the pancreas complains of upper abdominal pain. Is he having the nociceptive pain from the cancer, or is he having a partial obstruction? Is he having a spasm? Is it a colicky pain? You think it is cancer pain, it could be simply the pain of constipation. So review the type of pain. Our preparation is over. Now we are reviewing the type of pain only, then we will change the medication. What I would strongly recommend is that if in the first 2 weeks you are not achieving pain relief, they go into another box. Here is a group of people who need special attention. You give a thought to all this. What is the type of pain? Have we missed an unusual kind of pain? And is there a psychosocial issue worsening the pain experience? We have talked about in the session on pain also. Somebody's feeling of fear will worsen the pain experience. Depression, anxiety, everything will worsen pain. So the person you need to go into, look, I know that you are having a lot of pain. We'll see what we can do about it. But tell me, apart from the pain, what is bothering you? And that will bring out problems. Secondly, one thing that we forget in palliative care sometimes is we undervalue interventions. Interventional pain physicians undervalue pharmacotherapy. I am both. At one time, I was an interventional pain man. Now I do pharmacotherapy. Or if intervention is needed, I send the patient to somewhere else. If you have somebody who is doing interventions, it will be good to establish a relationship. Say, for example, that patient with CA pancreas, whose pain relief is hard to achieve, may actually do very well after a celiac plexus blockade. So, interventional procedures, if appropriate, we'll have to consider. And non-pharmacological measures. What I have shown in the picture is something that my wife has been on for the last week for a tennis elbow. This is a simple thing. The one pain measure with zero side effect, transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation. That's not going to be a slow treatment for cancer pain, but it can be an adjunct to some pains. So remember, our first step was review the type of pain and review psychosocial factors. Second point to be reviewed is there a role for interventions and non-pharmacological measures? 3, are we using the right medicines? Are we using the right dose? Are we using them at the right frequency? For this kind of pain, what should we be doing? Okay, for somebody with a constant pain, I have given a prescription there. Please go through the 4 medicines given. Is that combination good? Do you have any criticism? Will you reply by chat? Okay, one by one. Is the paracetamol okay? Okay, this is a 50 kg man. 50 kg person, paracetamol okay? Please respond by chat.
Okay, 1% paracetamol QID is better. 100%
Absolutely.
is okay.
Paracetamol has, for constant pain, I said, has to be given 4 times a day. You don't get a duration of action of more than 6 hours. TID is not satisfactory. What about the dose? 50 kg man, 500 milligram?
One comment is 650 milligram.
At least 12 milligram per kg. Okay. Simplest medicine, what is possibly the commonest used medicine in the whole world. Please remember this. At least 12 milligram per kg. 12 to 15 milligram per kg is okay. But 4 times a day. Okay, good. Morphine okay? That may be okay. We may have to adjust the dose or up or down, but 4-hourly morphine is acceptable. We usually give a double dose at bedtime, but that's not a mandatory law. Bisacodyl, that is our Dulcolax, 10 milligrams SOS, okay. Any responses? Not even one response?
Sir, we have written in the chat box.
Dr. Sunil? Sir,
So,
we have
so
received.
it's okay, okay, everybody is okay. And Steve, no, Steve, right?
Yes, sir, not SOS.
No, yes, Steve, Neelima,
Rashmi said and better.
Rashmi, uh, I agree. If we are giving morphine 4 hourly, morphine SOS is not acceptable. Almost invariably for 99% of people, unless it is started on the first day, 10 milligrams at bedtime. Sometimes you have to increase it later. So SOS for somebody on 4 hourly morphine is not acceptable. Okay, you don't know about the nature of the pain, so I will not ask you about to comment on gabapentin, but we are coming to gabapentin anyway later. Shall I move on with your permission?
Yes, sir.
You, just to expand on the possibility of gabapentin, Raju, you will be sharing this PowerPoint with everybody, right?
Yes, sir, I would be.
Okay. About the you see the WHO guidelines that I have given the link for. If you Google for it, this is recent, 2019. And for neuropathic pain and cancer, WHO guidelines say as a general rule, amitriptyline is the first line drug. And I'll leave you to read the second paragraph. WHO quotes 4 studies, if you look at the document, with evidence that the company falsified evidence, created false evidence in favor of gabapentin and pregabalin. WHO is not recommending gabapentinoids because there is inadequate evidence. What evidence is there is that they were lying about it. Nobody is saying that it's a useless medicine, but multiple studies have shown that for the majority of people, inexpensive amitriptyline is the first line drug. This is not the only study. I would request you, there is a glamour about gabapentin and pregabalin. They are glamorous. Most physicians, neurologists, cardiologists, orthopedics, everybody prescribes these medicines for everybody. But that is the power of advertisement and salesmanship. Please think again. Learn, you have to learn how to use amitriptyline properly. Start with low, 12.5 or 25, depending on the weight of the patient. Gradually increase, making sure that drowsiness is monitored. After a week or so, the drowsiness will get less. Only then increase it. That may be the better thing. Okay, I'm moving on. Now, we were actually talking about review 3 steps. What kind of pain? Psychosocial issues. What's the nature of pain? Are we using the right medications? Correct the correctables. Oh, that was in the second one. Role of interventions and pharmacological measures, and reviewing the adjuvant medications. Now we are after the first 3 steps of preparation and the first 3 steps of review. We are ready to move forward with the planning a altered regime. In preparation for this, one thing you have to understand, in a good number of people, when you give opioids, the patient gets neurotoxicity. What do we mean by neurotoxicity? What are the manifestations of neurotoxicity with morphine? Anybody?
Any answers?
Myoclonus just
Myoclonus, good. What else? Drowsiness, undue drowsiness. Everybody may be a little sleepy in the first few days, but undue drowsiness, myoclonus. What else? There is one thing you must always ask for. It will be good to ask that to everybody after the first 2 days. Do you get unpleasant dreams? Unpleasant dreams are the forerunner of delirium, absolutely prevalent delirium. And unpleasant dreams may be the prelude. Unpleasant dreams will reduce the quality of sleep, make life very difficult for the patient. Unpleasant dreams, delirium, even hallucinations. So these are the adverse effects of neurotoxic effects of morphine. And let us see why that happens. Please excuse this little bit of pharmacodynamics. You see the 3 metabolites? M6-glucuronide, we believe, has an analgesic property. These have been isolated 25 years back, at least, but we still do not know enough about them. We think that morphine molecules and morphine 6-glucuronide molecules both attach to the receptors and cause analgesia. Whereas we suspect that morphine 3-glucuronide contributes to the neurotoxicity. At least we believe so. And unfortunately, maybe something like 20% of human beings have a difference in the body structure so that they metabolize morphine in such a way as to cause the glucuronidation in 20% or thereabouts causes more of M3G to be released, more of morphine 3-glucuronide to be released. So those people particularly will have delirium. Secondly, if the patient's pain is not morphine sensitive, not fully morphine sensitive, like for example, a pancreatic pain or a neuropathic pain, then again, patient may tend to get neurotoxicity. So if the hepatic metabolism results in M3G, what can we do about it? This patient is not tolerating morphine. 10 milligrams is not enough. You increase the dose of 15 milligram Q4H, he gets side effects. Kya karega? Any thoughts? Anybody? Sorry. Is there some way of reducing the toxic metabolites? Let me suggest 2 measures. Change the morphine. Go to another step 3 medicine. And don't jump to fentanyl, which is expensive. Methadone is the inexpensive option. Before the course is over, from Sunil and others, learn enough about methadone. Same rules control morphine and methadone. If you can get morphine legally, you can get methadone also. It is not, if anything, it is less expensive if you compare a daily dose. But it's a little more complicated medicine to use. Dose can be increased only gradually. So you may need a little more expertise to use methadone. Of course, transdermal fentanyl is another option. More difficult to titrate, not only expensive, titration to the appropriate dose is also difficult with fentanyl. I'm not going into the details of these medicines now, but certainly if the time permits, I'll try to answer any questions. And Sunil anyway is here and he has about 10 times more experience with methadone than I. So one thing you can do is to switch to another medicine from morphine. And yet another thing is to change the route of administration. What will happen if instead of giving it orally, you give it parenterally, subcutaneous or intravenously? What's the advantage? Less will pass through the liver. Unlike absorption from the stomach, you are giving it into the bloodstream directly. First pass metabolism in the liver will be less. Therefore, there will be less of M3G in the body. Therefore, we see this time and again, patients receiving parenteral morphine seem to tolerate parenteral morphine better than oral morphine when they have neurotoxicity. Of course, there is the difficulty. We'll either have to admit the patient or patient will have to be seen at home frequently. These are difficulties for administration at the home setting. Will you send the patient morphine to be used at home? Okay, the law doesn't say anything about it, but that is more risky. Sending ampules home is risky. The chance of diversion is more. We never send ampules home. If a patient needs injection at home, we put in a butterfly needle, teach the family how to push in 1 ml at a time. We can't afford to send syringe pumps home to patients, unlike in Western countries. Therefore, we put in a butterfly needle somewhere, fill a syringe so that one dose is 1 ml, and teach a family member to push in 1 ml at a time. Every 2 days, the family member comes, takes a fresh syringe home. When we cannot do it every other day at home, this is what we do sometimes. Anybody worried about this? Is there a question before I move on? Yes, Dr. Geetika, loaded injection only. Karpaga, oral morphine can be given, but when there is oral morphine given, neurotoxicity is more likely because of first pass metabolism. So ordinarily, we only give oral morphine to everybody by mouth, by the clock. But if the patient has neurotoxicity, a patient may tolerate parenteral morphine more than oral morphine. Karpaga, is your question answered?
Yes, sir. I understood now, sir.
Thank you for asking, giving me the opportunity to clarify. Okay, now
Thank you, sir.
I will also next go into this step of treatment. Sorry. Remember what we said, we'll try switching to another opioid, or we will try parenteral administration if it is feasible. And a third measure that we'll consider is treating central sensitization. We touched upon central sensitization in the first session on pain, where we said there could be a sensitization of the nociceptor, recruitment of silent or sleepy nociceptors, remember? recruitment of adjacent spinal segments, or sensitization of the dorsal horn. In the beginning, I mentioned a patient with a scar pain, inguinal hernia scar pain, which destroyed a family. We tried everything else. The patient responded to small dose opioids, but when you increase the dose, he didn't tolerate it. This could be because of central sensitization, which can occur with time. It is never seen on the first day, but it can occur over a few days or few weeks or few months. What happens is the dorsal horn cell becomes hypersensitive. If on the first day, one impulse going from here causes one impulse to go to the brain, after the first week, one impulse from the nociceptor may cause 10 impulses to go from the dorsal horn cell. And the next month, it may be one impulse causing 100 impulses going to the brain. You can see what happens. I am oversimplifying it. There is a process of loss of integrity of the dorsal horn also. I am not going into it. Maximum. So if this happens, you can imagine, I give my morphine, it is not effective because whatever impulses go has caused dorsal horn cells to be abnormal, so that my morphine will no longer be effective. So, ladies and gentlemen, what can treat central sensitization? Anybody, any suggestion? What medicine can be used for central sensitization? Suppose I help you by saying that the neurotransmitter involved in causing central sensitization is N-methyl-D-aspartate, NMDA. And if I say that NMDA blockade may treat central sensitization, how do you react to that? What medicine can block NMDA? Anesthetists in the group, you are all familiar with this.
Dr. Nilima says ketamine.
Nilima, absolutely correct. Ketamine. Ketamine is an anesthetic agent. Hey, it's an agent that we use to induce general anesthesia. How can you give it for a pain patient?
Sub-anesthetic doses of ketamine, another response.
Very good. Savitri says sub-anesthetic doses of ketamine. Absolutely, Savitri. Nilima, Savitri, thank you. Sub-anesthetic doses of ketamine, roughly about 1/10 of what is necessary for treating pain, given at 6 to 8 hourly interval, may be enough. So the process is something like this. It is called a ketamine burst therapy. You are not planning to give it forever, though rarely long-term may be necessary. Usually, the burst therapy is for 3 to 5 days. You start low, 100 milligram in 24 hours. You see this equipment, it's called a syringe infusion pump. Syringe driver. It's an infusion pump. It's portable, so that the patient can walk about. This costs about 45,000 rupees now. But one machine can last for years. Now, if you have a syringe driver, you may use that. Start with about 100 milligrams in 24 hours and gradually increase over 3 to 5 days. Maybe then once dose is adjusted, you may continue for another 3 to 5 days. Neelima, Savitri, or anybody else, what side effect shall we look out for? We are not going to make anybody unconscious with these dose, but the side effects of ketamine as an anesthetic, nystagmus is the mildest. Patient can get lightheaded, drowsy, delirious. That is possible. Delirium, as Savitri says, nystagmus, delirium. And if, as Neelima says, dose is even more hallucination. No, Savitri, at this dose, ketamine cannot cause apnea. We are not giving an anesthetic dose. We are giving only 1/10 of an anesthetic dose. We don't expect respiratory depression, even if you are combining it with a benzodiazepine and opioid. But neurotomimetic side effects, psychotomimetic side effects, like drowsiness, delirium, hallucinations, etc. are possible. So you have to be careful. Start low, gradually increase. Okay. Anesthetists are used to this, will be more confident, but I do think anybody can use it. If someday you have a patient who you think needs it, please contact us. Sunil or I or one of our team will help you. You will need some guidance when you are doing the first 2 or 3 patients. And this is not for everybody, of course. So apart from the psychotomimetic side effects of delirium, etc., do you know of any other adverse effect that we should be cautious about when you are using it for 3 to 5 days for build up and 3 to 5 days for continuation, 1 to 2 weeks? What problems are possible? I will come to the home administration later, Neelima, but please tell me. Seizures again. Oh yes, I suppose. I have not known of seizures with this kind of thing, but the ketamine does have a pro-epileptic effect, and if a patient has a seizure history, it may be better to avoid it. But something that we did not know earlier is that, let me first answer the question that Neelima asked. Neelima asked, can it be used for home, at home? My answer is yes, but make sure that you call the patient twice a day to monitor the patient. Dose I have given here, and actually we suspect that norketamine, because of the metabolite which is active, oral ketamine may be more effective. It may be more effective in causing toxicity also. Dose requirement may be even less than oral, than parenteral. And it can be given 3 to 4 days, times a day. And here is the reference that you can read. It has a limited place as an add-on therapy in complex pain patients if other therapeutic options have failed. So at the home setting, oral ketamine can be used. I would not dare to use an injectable infusion in the home setting in the unmonitored patients, but I have numerous times used oral ketamine. But the major side effects, this we did not know even 15 years back. One, ketamine given like this for several days can cause hepatic damage. So after reading about it, some 10 years back, we started doing SGPT as a routine for patients given ketamine for pain management. Not for a single dose in the theater, is in the context when you are giving it for several days. So what we found was that, okay, we used to use it, do SGPT every 3 days. We found that in a significant number of people, there was an elevation of SGPT. When we found an elevation of SGPT, we either reduced the dose or stopped it altogether. We cannot risk a hepatic failure. Similarly, another side effect that we did not know earlier was vesicopathy. Patient feels burning sensation of micturition. You do a culture, you don't grow anything. Now, this is dangerous in the sense, if it is well established, even after you stop the ketamine therapy, the bladder symptoms may continue. Patient will be miserable. So, I mentioned a few problems that you will have to monitor when you are using ketamine. One, check for lightheadedness, delirium, hallucinations, etc. 2, monitor SGPT every 3 days. 3, every day ask, every day, do you have burning micturition? The patient may not continue because considered significant, may not complain, we have to ask. And if they say, yes, I have burning micturition, stop the ketamine. You cannot continue ketamine for him. That's a summary of what I have talked about so far. We mentioned 3 steps in preparation. Believe the patient, look for correctable factors and correct them. Check whether the patient is adhering to the treatment regime. Check the emotional status. Should we review possible interventions or non-pharmacological measures like TENS or massage or heat therapy or cold therapy, even anything. 3, review your medications one by one. Are we using the right drugs at the right interval? And are we using the right adjuvant medication? So the prepare and review measure steps are the initial 6 steps. Okay. Believe the patient, correct the correctable, check adherence, check emotional status, reconsider interventions and non-pharmacological measures, review our own medicines. And then you go on to modifying the treatment. Can we stop the morphine or gradually withdraw the morphine and instead add methadone? Or if the patient is really rich, can we consider fentanyl transdermal? Local anesthetics are one group that I have not talked about. It is only for anesthetists to use. Intravenous local anesthetics, I would not recommend to be used by anybody other than cardiologists and anesthetists who are familiar with it. So I have not emphasized on it, and we'll consider using ketamine. These are the various steps that I have described so far. Hey, we initially mentioned that 3/4 of all patients will get pain relief on simple application of the ladder. Thereafter, I have given these 3 steps, 3 levels of steps. With all this, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, everybody will not get adequate pain relief. There will still be a minority of patients, particularly in non-cancer pain.
Dr. Rajagopal? Hello? Dr. Sunil, I think we lost, sir.
Okay. But PowerPoint is still there?
Yes, sir, it's still there.
saying, I don't know what all you heard, that with all this, there will still be a minority of patients who do not get adequate pain relief. Not enough for them to be satisfied. And you in medicine, which is not a precise science, you know that you cannot solve all problems. Not everybody will get cured. Not many people die after all tower treatment. Similarly, in pain, there will be a significant number of people who may not get adequate pain relief. And there, what I have to tell you is that it's a question of accepting failure. If it is a cancer pain and a person is terminally ill, we may consider palliative sedation, which I suppose will be discussed on another day. But what we should do is never to desert the patient. I have several times in my life had to tell a patient, I know that whatever I do has not given you enough relief. And I'll always remember Patu, some 15 years back, who immediately said, please don't tell me not to come back here. They need us to hold their hands. They need us to achieve at least a little bit of pain relief. They need us to treat any escalation of pain that may happen. It's okay to say that I know that I have not helped you enough, but we'll keep on giving you whatever support we can. And they will need us for psychosocial spiritual support and for aggravation of the pain, which may sometimes happen. So with that, I am coming to the conclusion of my talk. I think Raju, shall I stop screen sharing? If you have any question for which our connection, our presentations needed, I will come back at that time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions?
I have a question. So may I ask?
Nilima,
Yeah,
your voice
you are
is
not-
very feeble.
Can you hear now?
That's better.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
I've
we can.
typed it. I just want to know if oral ketamine and parenteral ketamine are equally effective to treat the central sensitization.
Nilima and others, one of the things that I said is that oral ketamine may actually be more effective dose by dose, because more of norketamine is made in the liver, and that may be therapeutically effective. So it is not 1:1. Actually, oral ketamine may be more effective for management of a chronic pain. But I didn't say it is, I said it may be. We do not know enough about oral ketamine, even after all these years, because in Western countries, especially in countries where medico-legal issues are more, they use it less. They are very scared about the psychotomimetic side effects, so that the patient may claim that something. So medico-legal fears prevent a lot of use of ketamine. We do not have enough evidence that oral ketamine is better, but oral ketamine may be better.
Excuse me.
Dr. Savitri?
Yeah. Hello, sir. Sir, regarding...
Savitri, you are not audible. So closer to the microphone, please.
Okay. Sir, am I audible now?
Yes,
Yeah, you are.
Sir, regarding that herpes genitalia, the pain will be severe, right? For them, shall we prescribe that local application of lidocaine and pregabalin gel, whether it is advisable in a vaginatus stage or something, like a cold sore?
Savitri,
Sorry, sir.
we do not have enough evidence to recommend pregabalin. But
Okay.
a local anesthetic application itself over mucosa will be effective. But only the caution is whenever you use local anesthetic over a raw an ulcer, for example, be mindful of the total dose that you are using.
Okay.
In a herpes, I see no problem. Yes, local and locally applied lignocaine can be used in herpes and for any area where mucosa is not intact. Sorry, mucosa or skin is not intact. If the mucosa or skin is intact, there would be a case for using 10% lignocaine patches, which are expensive, which are not marketed in India, but some pharmacists procure it from abroad and use it. So if you have an area of intense skin pain, 10% of lidocaine patches can be used. One patch stays in for a day.
Okay. Amitriptyline also we can prescribe now, sir?
Amitriptyline for all neuropathic pains, especially in cancer, is considered a first-line drug.
Okay.
That is the first thing that you will consider. So suppose the patient does not tolerate dose of more than 10 milligram morphine, you continue whatever is well tolerated and add neuropathic medicine. And if it is something like postherpetic neuralgia, you will not use opioids. It may not help at all. Amitriptyline is what you will start and increase.
Okay. Thank you.
Any
more
other
questions?
question? Anybody? So let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, if you have no more questions. If you, after starting morphine, you go ahead and ask the patient, do you have unpleasant dreams? And they say, yes, yes, I am unable to sleep at night because I get these frightening dreams all through the night. And the family member says, when she sleeps, she talks in her sleep. The patient is on 15 milligram morphine 4 hourly. What will you do in such a case? What are the various things you can do in such a case? Either speak up, unmute yourself and speak up, or send a chat response. This is an everyday situation. There's no catch in the question. The answer is fairly obvious. You can consider an alternate opioid, but immediately you will reduce the dose of morphine. Consider methadone. Yes, you can do that. That's a good strategy. If it is not severe, the patient says, no, don't change the medicine. I'm fine. My pain is much better. I only wish I could sleep a little bit better. Maybe you can consider putting the patient on Well, if the patient is already having psychotomimetic side effects, more than a benzodiazepine, what will maybe more appropriate will be a small dose of haloperidol. With 1 milligram haloperidol at bedtime, the patient may tolerate your opioid better. But that's only for borderline neurotoxicity. If the neurotoxicity is severe, you have to reduce the dose, as Savitri and Nilima suggest. You may have to change over to another medicine like methadone, or you might consider an alternate route of administration. Hey, let me ask you another question. You find this patient with possible central sensitization as evidenced by progressive pain over a period of time, poor response to opioids and diminishing response to opioids. Maybe that's the kind of person who also may have abnormal sensations. What's allodynia? Somebody tell me what's allodynia? A-L-L-O-D-Y-N-I-A?
No sensation to pain, sir.
No, not
Sir,
exactly.
in pain when touching the excessive pain, that even the clothes, if they touch the body, they will have.
Light touch also will give
Juveria.
excruciating pain.
Yes, sir.
No, Juveria, what you mentioned is hyperalgesia. You touch a pain, a painful site, and there's exaggerated pain. Allodynia is a sensation, that a stimulus that is not ordinarily nociceptive, causing pain. For example, you touch here and I feel pain. That is not expected. If you touch your friend here in the arm, the friend doesn't feel pain, but in the presence of allodynia, that may happen. So these are suggestive of the central sensitization. So if there is central sensitization and you want to try oral ketamine, where will you buy oral ketamine from? In some countries, oral preparation of ketamine is available. You can imagine in a whole country, the sale will be so small that companies are not interested. We can't buy oral ketamine. What we do, draw out the injectable ketamine. Most preparations are very bitter. Mix it with a well-sweetened drink, very sweet tea or coffee or fruit juice, and then administer it. You can't buy oral ketamine. Okay, Raju, 4 o'clock.
Dr. Sunil, can we start our case presentation?
Yeah, we can move on to patient story, which will be presented by Dr. Savitri. Dr. Savitri.
Dr. Savitri, can you unmute from your end and speak?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
I am also having that PPT. I have done some alteration. Shall I share it now?
Sure,
One
Doctor.
second.
Yes.
Video disable.
Okay.
Which place?
Trichy, sir.
Oh, I see. Okay. Which institution are you with?
Sir, earlier I have worked in Narayana Multi-Specialty Hospital, Whitefield. And then I have worked in Jivika ICU. Now I am doing freelancing, sir.
Okay.
Shall I go ahead, sir?
Yeah, please.
Yes. Good evening to everyone. I am Dr. Savitri, anesthetist. Today I am going to present a case. I would like to share my mother's history as a patient story. A 64-year-old female presented with a upper GI bleed due to large gastric tumor. She had an episode of fainting attack at home followed by she has been brought to casualty. There she had a breathing difficulty. She had breathing difficulty for a week, but whenever she took rest, it will be she feels comfortable. It's not associated with sweating. She said she had some sort of chest tightness. It's not associated with sweating. She had a watery stool, loose stools, 2 to 3 episodes, and one episode of black colored stools, and uh, history of chills and rigor was there. Moving on to the history of illness, she had a loss of appetite for 1 week, and there was a history of decreased intake of food for 1 month. If she takes spicy food, she may feel she felt it was very burning sensation in her abdomen, so she avoids taking spicy food. History of giddiness for 1 month, and there was a history of burping and bloating sensation on and off for 1 month. When she felt giddiness, she herself went to the doctor. She took the blood test. Hemoglobin around it was 8, 6. Last time it was 6. So moving on to the past history, she is not a diabetic hypertensive. She is a known case of hypothyroidism. For 1.5 years, for that she was taking Tylenol medication. She has underwent hysterectomy 20 years ago. She is a known case of nutritional anemia. From that time onwards, her hemoglobin would be around 9 to 10. And she was taking oral supplements also. Recently, 1 year before also, when her hemoglobin was down, she has visited, I asked her to visit 2-3 physicians. There, they have missed the diagnosis. And actually, she felt some lump. She thought it was some gas. Because of gas, some lump is there. But 2-3 physicians have missed that lump abdomen. On examination, patient, she is conscious, oriented. She was tachycardia, tachypneic, and febrile. She was paler. Puffiness of face was there. Pulse rate was 130 per minute and respiratory is 28 per minute. BP is around 60 millimeter mercury. Cardiovascular system, respiratory system are found to be normal. And apart from that, sinus tachycardia due to anemia, other systems were found to be normal. When we have done that evaluation, basic investigation with the hemoglobin, CBC and other things, hemoglobin, we found it is 3 grams. So her blood group is O negative. So it was very difficult to get the blood. Somewhat we arranged, we got donors from relatives. So we have transfused, we have stabilized her. Then she has been subjected for the investigation. We have planned, they have planned to take upper GI endoscopy. There they have found, sorry. There they have found a big ulcer. There they have found big ulcer in the mid body of the stomach along the greater curvature. So the next day they have planned for the ultrasound. They have found that exophatic mass arising from the outer surface of the stomach. Then retrospectively, everyone is palpating her abdomen. We can able to feel the mass. Like including me, I have missed that mass. Physical examination, I have missed. Even though I was staying away from her. Next, we have, she has been subjected to take CT abdomen. There they have found the exophatic ulcerated mass arising from the greater curvature of the stomach. So possibility of the gastrointestinal stromal tumors. There were no hepatic metastasis. They have planned to do laparoscopic partial gastrectomy. Moving on, partial gastrectomy. We have planned that much only at the time of diagnosis. But during surgery, it was a very big, surgeon has to go for gastrectomy with a lymphadenectomy, D2 lymphadenectomy with Roux-en-Y reconstruction, along with a feeding jejunostomy. So regarding her psychosocial aspects, the condition was, it was very stressful. She was very stressful about her health condition and the diagnosis. She knows that I am hiding something to her, but I told only we are going to remove the tumor. Otherwise, she told we will go home now. Later, we will come for the surgery. More tubings like nasogastric tube, two drainage tubes, catheters, and epidural infusion. Lot of tubings around her causes frustration and anger. It will lead to depression. In our society, my mother has 3 daughters. So she'll be worrying about daughters are spending money for her health issues. She had some prestige issues also. She was worrying about those things. She made everyone, she has educated everyone in a good position like engineer, doctor, and teacher. Regarding medication, apart from the IV fluid and PRVC packed red blood cells, they have transfused and antibiotics. Since it is going to be a severe pain, they have planned for the epidural infusion. 0.125% bupivacaine 4 to 6 ml per hour for 3 days post-operatively. And antibiotic they have given. Injection paracetamol 1 gram IV TDS for 7 days it was going. And then they have changed to oral form. Oral means via feeding jejunostomy, everything they have to give. And the injection tramadol 50 mg IV BD, it was SOS. If at all required, IV SOS, because whenever she is having pain, she can take that one. Injection Clexane 40 mg subcutaneously OD for 7 days to avoid the DVT. Injection ondansetron 4 mg IV BD. And then injection Lesuride 25 milligram IV TDS for the intestinal motility. Along with that, chest physiotherapy, we have to give the good pain relief. Then only physiotherapy can do. We can able to mobilize. Main concern is revealing the diagnosis and prognosis of the disease to the patient and the family members. And we have to give education about her nutritional status, which is very, very essential for her. And we have to take care of her stress also. And there was a weight loss, like from 45 kg to she has become 35 kg. She'll be looks like a skeleton covered with the skin only. So she doesn't want to meet the relatives. She needs isolation. She refused to meet the relatives. And we have to give her a psychological support. My sister, she will get a panic attack. Like she will not cope up with the things. She will get tensed up early, and it is not very easy to disclose the things. But finally, I have counseled her and educated her. We have appointed one home nurse. We have taken, she was taken care of her nicely. And along with my sister's support, my mother got improved. So next, move on to the summary. 64-year-old female presented with dyspnea and giddiness, diagnosed as upper GI bleed due to large gastric tumor. Biopsy report shows gastrointestinal tumor. They have asked for immunohistochemistry. So that has changed everything. Like it came out like gastric schwannoma. It is a benign tumor. So we have escaped from the other things. Regarding postoperative pain, she felt a dull aching pain all over the abdomen. For that, we have started epidural infusion. Day 1 and day 2, her numerical rating scale was 7 by 10, 6 by 10. Slowly it was coming down. Whenever she is getting that breakthrough pain, she will get that injection tramadol. That time her pain will come down from 8 by 10 to 4 by 10. So remaining 4 by 10, they said because of major surgery. So you have to tolerate that pain. And injection paracetamol IV, 1 gram TDS going on. So moving on to the discussion, does she need palliative care? For gastrectomy, what are the drugs we can prescribe for her in future? Is there any concern? And what is the follow-up care during COVID-19? Enhance the standard of, how can we enhance the standard of living. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Savitri.
Yes.
So we have been talking about palliative care for last few classes. So I request participants to answer some of the questions in this. Does she need palliative care? Anybody? Yeah, Dr. Jaware says yes. Can you explain why she needs palliative care?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so she needs palliative care post-op, as if we look at it from a psychosocial aspect, she has withdrawn herself. She is finding it difficult to cope with the whole with whatever has happened to her, and she is taking it as a calamity that has befallen on her. So she needs to be counseled, and she needs to uh, slowly come out of it and accept it and be happy with it, and slowly she will improve, because it was a benign thing. So hopefully her situation is going to improve, and she needs to be made she needs to be counseled and told that things will improve for her. And meanwhile her pain scale is also going down. So yeah, with counseling, I think everything will become okay for her. Apart from that, she needs guidance from health care professionals for her, because of her situation, her feedings, and she is a case of anemia, as well as so many other comorbidities. So that needs to be taken into account, and it should be and she needs that to be followed up as well. Thank you.
Okay. Sir, can you tell us about the need of palliative care in this patient? We had many answers.
She needs some nutritional assistance also, sir, actually. So palliative care is definitely essential for her, because she needs a overall uh, governance, especially as previously mentioned, the psychosocial aspect has to be definitely taken care of. She has to be counseled, and she has to be made aware that things are not so bad, that things will turn out to be better, and she needs that part of as well. And definitely, since she's on the tubing and on the feeds, her nutritional status also has to be governed. So and pain relief. So she needs an overall management. So palliative care is a must for in this patient.
Sir, can you talk more about the need of palliative care in this patient? Sir, you are muted.
Sunil, I shall try to answer this question, and then I fear I will have to go. I was planning to leave at 4:15, but let me try to answer your question. So, as Sunil also knows very well, and everybody knows, palliative care is for any serious health-related suffering. I'm not saying that a palliative care doctor has to come and see. If the surgeon and everybody in the treating team was aware of the principles of palliative care, that will not be necessary. But palliative care has to be part of the whole treatment regime. Savitri, is a very personal thing. This must have been very difficult for you to make this presentation, and share it with others. You did it for the benefit of the whole group. Thank you very much for your generosity. Yes, in every phase, for the physical suffering, the pain, the distension, everything. For the emotional status, I mean, you all heard how disturbed the mother was. The need, communication need, for her need to know what's happening to her. For her relationships, what all thoughts should be going through her mind? If a daughter is hiding something from the mother, wouldn't the mother know purely from the facial expression? There must be a lot of anxiety inside her. And every time the pain gets worse, she must be wondering, why is God doing this to me? So on every way, even if it's an acute pain, even if it was not a long-term disease, application of principles of palliative care are important. Any patient, I repeat, with serious health-related suffering needs palliative care. Savitri, before I go, do you have a specific question
Yes,
that
sir.
you would like me to answer? I mean, it was Savitri who made the case presentation, right? Unless,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
so Savitri, do you have any
Your voice
specific
is
question to
breaking.
me? Oh,
The voice is breaking.
is this any better now? Now that I have switched off the video,
My
can
connection
you hear
is
me?
No, sir.
unstable.
You
Yes,
are
sir.
clear.
Okay, okay. It is Savitri.
I think
Sunil,
my
please.
side is it's
Okay,
unstable.
okay, okay. Sunil, please take over.
Now it's
Sunil, I
better,
have
sir.
to go now.
Okay, sir. So the next question was, are there any medication that has to be withheld considering the gastric gastrectomy? Anybody? Anybody? Do we need to withhold any medications considering she has gastrectomy? Okay. Do not administer NSAIDs. Okay, that's
Why, sir?
who was that?
Sir,
Dr. Rashmi.
Savitri.
Dr. Rashmi. Dr. Rashmi, can you tell us why did you tell that NSAIDs should not be administered?
Yeah, I feel because this was a gastrectomy, and I don't think it would be a total gastrectomy because it was only a schwannoma. So it doesn't make sense to give an NSAIDs that would lead to gastritis, that would lead to further issues related to gastritis.
Okay. So I think NSAIDs, okay, whatever it may be, we know that NSAIDs can produce many side effects, not only gastritis,
Yeah.
but also many other problems. Even with a single dose of NSAID, it can precipitate renal failure. So in this patient, NSAID, if absolutely necessary, can be given, but absolute necessity is something when patient has inflammation. Otherwise, in other patients also, it will be better to avoid NSAIDs if possible, because it has lot of side effects, but many doctors write NSAIDs right and left. And you know that once you give a prescription for a patient, this medication is not only going to be used for the patient, but also for the family and for the neighbors also. and that will be continued lifelong sometime. So that is going to be a bigger problem. So in her specifically, NSAIDs may be given if necessary, but whoever it is taking short course of NSAIDs for a only for the necessary duration, and maybe during the first
Is there any
few,
restriction?
give it for the lowest possible days and lowest possible days. And do you think is there a chance
Excuse
of
me.
bleeding further, Dr. Savitri?
No, no, sir. No.
No.
I mean, we have to follow up, but the nature of the thing is, it is very rare to recur.
Okay.
Now they have done a curative surgery. Actually, what Madam was said is correct. Like no need for the gastrectomy, but at the time of surgery, because of its larger size, they have gone for those things. Otherwise, we could have come out with the partial only.
Okay.
So we don't
Thank
know.
you.
Once the immunohistochemistry only confirmed that this is thing.
Okay.
Sir,
So if,
antibiotics, is there any restriction? Antibiotic, anything we have to careful? Antibiotic? No.
I don't think.
Antibiotic.
And no,
Okay.
but if you think that there is a chance of bleeding, then I think it would be better to avoid NSAIDs, and if needed, COX-2 specific inhibitors like atoricoxib can be given. But you know that if you continue to give that, then the other side effects like myocardial infarction and cerebrovascular accident are the two main side effects or the serious side effects that can occur with specific COX-2 inhibitors, especially if you give it for more days.
Okay.
Okay, and maybe the prokinetic in the first few days of surgery may not be indicated. Maybe for the first 3 or 4 days, it's not indicated. Otherwise, I think the other medications can be administered. Any other opinions from anybody else? Yeah, Dr.
Sir, after a month, like 45th day or post-operatively 30th day, they have removed the feeding jejunostomy. Other things are quite well. They have removed that. Now she is doing well.
Okay. And the follow-up care during COVID-19. So
yes.
I'm sure there will be many answers for this. Any of you are working with COVID patients? Anybody?
Could I try answering?
Yes, Dr.
The field is actually wide open, but in her case, because of her compromised nutritional status, her weight is too low, she's undergone a major surgery. So in her case, exposure should be even further tried to be prevented, exposure to the virus. And hence, whatever measures could be taken to keep her away would be applicable in this case more. I mean, I was just bringing out the points that why she is more susceptible. The nutritional status, the low weight, the major surgery, and the emotional vulnerability. All these make her more susceptible, and therefore she should be avoiding exposure altogether.
Yeah. Thank you, madam. There is another opinion from, same opinion. She needs more online consultation. Now it's an age for online consultation, and many hospitals are doing online consultation. So I think it will be better if you can keep her at home and do online consultation with your surgeon and nutritionist, etc. And maybe the results of the blood investigation may be informed online, and yeah, home visits if situation permits, because that is still less risky. Yeah, that's also another option, but um, she needs to be, if she needs to be seen by some other specialist like surgeon or somebody else, it will be difficult. I don't know whether any surgeons visits the patients at home. So the next question was enhance the standard of living. So what can we do to enhance the standard of living? Anybody?
Sir, can I try to answer?
Yeah. I think same. Quality of life is what, Dr. Savitri, did you mean quality
Yes,
of
sir.
life? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yes, please go on.
That thing, quality of
Yeah.
life only.
I feel she needs to be counseled, and she needs to feel relaxed and calm, and she needs phone. Maybe she can talk on phone because of the COVID situation. It is better if she gets support online or through telephone, uh, and basically counseling by her friends, relative, uh, family members.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Juvaria. Anybody else?
Sir, I would like to say one more thing. So her
Yeah.
daughter, who is taking care of her, who,
Hmm.
as ma'am mentioned, had an anxiety attack because
Hmm.
of her condition. I think
Hmm.
she is the one who also needs some emotional and psychological care and counseling, because she is taking care of her and the patient is seeing her all the time. So if
Hmm.
her mental status and condition is improved, it's better. So one, she'll be able to take better care of the mother. That is important. And two, if the mother sees her more comfortable with the mother's status and condition, so she will have a psychological edge that, okay, things with me are not going on, that my daughter is fainting and she's having anxiety attacks, because that tends to scare the patient more about her own status.
Okay. Anybody else? So I think we need to ask the mother what she understands about the disease now. Yeah. It would be better to explore to understand the insight of your mother, and then give the correct information so that the anxiety, anger, that all can be reduced. And as mentioned, it is very important to support the daughter who is with the mother. And once she is calm, otherwise, if she is not calm, that anxiety will be transferred to the mother. So it is very important to support the person who is looking after or caring for your mother. And nutritional status, of course, we need to look into. And it would be better to ask your mother what will, if we provide something, what is going to improve your quality of life. Quality of life is something which is personal for everybody. Something which is important for me may not be important for another person. So it would be better to ask her what are the things that is that needs to be better for you to give more quality of life. And of course, the medical things which we can take care of. Other than that, what else does she need to have a better quality of life? Dr. Savitri?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So
Actually,
yeah.
they have not prescribed any drugs, sir. Apart from the multivitamin, we have stopped. Like after
Okay.
a year, we have to follow with the CT scan. So
Yeah.
apart from multivitamin, she is not taking any medication. Only thing is she has to eat within, 2 hours, like because of that early dumping, no? So she used to eat like 4 to 5 times like that. Apart from that, she is doing quite good, sir.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Savitri, for coming up with your
Welcome.
mother's story. But I don't know whether it was painful for you. But anyway, thank you for
No, sir,
presenting.
somewhat I feel little relaxed.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, everybody.